The light was wrong. I stood in my cramped home studio, frowning at the stubborn shadows smearing across the canvas of white backdrop paper. My camera hung from my neck like dead weight. I adjusted the softbox a few degrees, then again, cursing softly as the overhead bulb flickered once, then steadied. The studio was really just the converted garage, a makeshift sanctuary of light and dust, the smell of old film chemicals still lingering from my analog days. I had poured myself into a new project, a series I'd been planning for months, maybe years, without even knowing it. The intimate unknown. Vulnerable portraits of subjects, stripped of pretense. Honest, raw, human. Only, I didn't have a subject. Well, not one who would cooperate. Rachel, I called toward the kitchen. Can you help me test the lighting? I heard the clink of a wine bottle against glass. Not tonight, she said. Her voice came soft, a little too casual, like she was swatting away a gnat. I just got home. I'm exhausted. I stepped into the doorway. She sat at the island, swirling a generous pour of Pinot Noir. Her tablet was propped up in front of her, and she was scrolling absently, maybe reading, maybe pretending to. She didn't look up. I leaned against the frame. It'll only take a few minutes. You said that last time. And then it was a whole hour, and I had to warm up leftovers for dinner. I bit back a sigh. I'm trying to make something real with this one, Ratch. I'm not just playing with lenses. I've got this vision. Now she looked up, raising an eyebrow. A vision that always seems to involve me getting undressed under fluorescent lights. It's just not what I need tonight. Her words didn't come with malice. Worse, they came with detachment. I'm not asking for sex, I said, too fast. It's not about that. She smiled without warmth. Isn't it? The air between us cooled. My camera, slung low against my chest, suddenly felt heavier. Before I could answer, the front door clicked open and a familiar voice floated in. Honey, I brought the good stuff. Claire, Rachel's best friend, and possibly the last person who could still make her laugh without effort. She breezed into the room like a glass of chilled Prosecco come to life. Bubbly, confident, just slightly too loud for the space. Her black leather jacket was draped over one shoulder, her red lipstick unapologetically bold against her pale skin. Did someone say leftovers? She asked, grinning as she spotted the wine. Or do I need to order sushi again like last time you two forgot to eat? Claire, Rachel exhaled, her smile suddenly real. You're a lifesaver. Claire's eyes met mine just briefly. Still playing with your cameras in that cave of yours? She teased. Still trying to make something matter. I replied, matching her tone. You know, instead of just scrolling Pinterest and pretending it's productivity. Her grin widened. Touché. They settled into girl talk quickly, Claire opening another bottle, Rachel leaning against the counter, their laughter slipping under the doorframe and into the studio like warm vapor. I went back to fiddling with my lights, but nothing felt right. The softness I wanted wasn't there. Neither was the subject. The space felt sterile, devoid of spark. I could hear Claire asking about the project, and Rachel muttering something about how she wasn't in the mood to be a muse anymore. I stared into the lens of my Canon. I saw nothing. Later, much later, I emerged to find them on the sofa. Rachel had her feet tucked under her, wine glass half drained. Claire sat closer to the edge, alert, one leg curled up under her, facing Rachel with intent. Their conversation slowed when I entered. Don't stop on my account, I said, managing a half smile. We were just talking about your little photo fetish, Claire said. Her tone was light, but her eyes stayed on me longer than the joke needed. Rachel chuckled, then stood, stretching. And with that, I'm calling it. Early meeting tomorrow. She bent to kiss Claire's cheek. You staying over? Nah, I'll Uber. She kissed me too. On the cheek, perfunctory, and patted off to bed. Claire lingered, sipping her wine. Her eyes flicked toward the studio door. You really doing that project? She asked. I nodded. Trying. What's it about? Honesty. Vulnerability. Want. Fear. She tilted her head, her loose blonde waves brushing her shoulder. Sounds intimate. I held her gaze. It's supposed to be. She set her glass down carefully and stood. Her eyes didn't leave mine as she walked past me toward the hallway. You need the right subject, she said over her shoulder, voice low. One who actually wants to be seen. I didn't sleep that night. Rachel had fallen asleep facing away from me. I lay in the darkness, the glow of my charging camera casting faint light on the dresser. My thoughts weren't innocent. They weren't purely artistic either. It wasn't just that Rachel wouldn't pose. It was that she didn't see me anymore. And maybe I'd stopped seeing her too. But Claire had looked. Really looked. And she didn't look away. It was nearly midnight when the house fell completely silent. Rachel's breathing beside me had settled into a slow, shallow rhythm. The kind of sleep you only reach after a second glass of wine and an emotional drain. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the ceiling fan, feeling the cool air brushing over the sheets and my skin, still warm from being beneath her and not with her. I turned gently, careful not to wake her, and slid out of bed. The hallway creaked under my weight as I moved barefoot past the guest bathroom, past the wall of framed photos we'd collected over the years, smiling snapshots from anniversaries and road trips, frozen happiness. I passed a photo of us on the Oregon coast, Rachel laughing, wind tearing at her scarf. I stopped, stared at it. She used to look at me like that. Downstairs, the studio was dimly lit by the pale light of my desk lamp. The room smelled faintly of dust and lavender, Claire's perfume. She'd left it behind once, months ago, and I'd never had the heart, or nerve, to return it. Now the scent just lingered like a quiet ghost. I powered on the iMac. The screen blinked to life, and with it, the grid of photos I'd taken over the past year. Dozens of portraits, friends, models, strangers I'd met online, but none of them stuck. None of them made me feel anything anymore. Not until my cursor landed on the test shots I'd taken of Rachel. The early ones, before things got blurry, before everything felt like a chore. Her eyes were soft, then, her hands unsure, but there was life in them. Now, she barely looked at the lens. Or me. You always want people to reveal something, Claire had said once, last fall, after I showed her a series I was proud of. But do you know what you're looking for? Back then, it felt like a challenge. Now it felt like a riddle I hadn't yet solved. The next morning, I found Claire's name lighting up my phone. Claire, did you get the shot you wanted last night? Me, no. She passed again. Claire, shocker. Claire, you need a new subject. One who won't ghost the frame. I stared at the screen a beat too long before replying. Me, know anyone who fits the bill? Claire, maybe. You home tonight? Me, always. She didn't respond right away. Instead, a few hours later, Rachel called to say she had a late meeting and would be staying at the office late. Big pitch. Might crash at Lila's if we go late, she added casually. I didn't even ask who Lila was. Just said okay and hung up. That evening, I made coffee. Not wine, coffee. I needed clarity, not haze. At 9:12 p.m., Claire knocked softly and let herself in. She wore black. A silky top that clung to her chest and stopped just above the curve of her waist, paired with tight jeans that made her hips a slow, impossible thing to ignore. Her eyes were lined darker than usual, her lips stained a muted berry. Nice to see the artist alive, she said, dropping her purse on the stool near the counter. I'm always alive, just sometimes dim. She raised an eyebrow. Well, let's see if we can fix that. We didn't start shooting right away. Instead, we stood in the studio, sipping coffee and making small talk. She asked about the theme of the project. I rambled about honesty, contrast, composition. She nodded, listening, but her expression said she wasn't buying all of it. You talk a lot about intimacy, she said finally, but I think you're afraid of it. I looked up from my camera, cocking a brow. What makes you think that? Because all your subjects look like they're waiting for permission to disappear. The air in the room tightened. And you think you could do better? I asked, partly teasing. She stepped closer, her voice low. I think I could show you what you're really chasing. Silence dropped like a shutter snap. Then she turned her head, slowly, letting her hair fall just enough to cover one eye. Set the lights, she said. So I did. The session started playfully. She stood under the soft glow, posing casually, playing with her hair, her collarbone, the tension in her shoulders. She leaned forward slightly, lips parted just enough to suggest something unspoken. She wasn't afraid of the camera. She looked right into it, unflinching. She knew how to be seen. I adjusted the lens, her face tightening into sharp relief, her eyes catching the light just right. Her lips curled slightly, not into a smile, but into an idea of one. Provocative. Alive. You're good at this, I said quietly. I used to date a photographer, she said, moving her body to a new angle. He wasn't half as focused. You're teasing. Maybe. Another snap. She ran a hand down her side. The fabric of her blouse clung to her as she moved. You want real? She asked, her voice breathier now. Something raw. I lowered the camera slightly. That's what this project's about. Claire stepped closer to the light, unbuttoned the top clasp of her blouse. Then another. Then another. She stopped at her bra, red lace beneath black silk. Her collarbone shimmered under the soft white glow. I could see the outline of her curves, subtle, perfect. You still want to shoot? She asked, her eyes meeting mine. I didn't answer. The room pulsed in the space between question and response. Then she stepped forward, barely an inch from me. Her breath warmed my neck. Maybe, she whispered, you just need a better muse. The door creaked upstairs. We froze. Rachel. I didn't even hear her come in. Claire's shirt was still unbuttoned. I nearly knocked the tripod over stepping back. She moved fast, grabbing her coat, slipping it on, laughing too loudly, like we'd been joking about nothing. Rachel poked her head down the hall, eyebrows raised. Claire. Hey, babe, Claire called smoothly. I was just keeping him company while you were out conquering the world. Rachel walked in, her makeup slightly smudged, heels clicking softly. Late night, she said, glancing between us. What are you two up to? Claire threw me a glance, then winked. Talking about art. You know how serious he gets. Rachel laughed tiredly. I'll bet. Claire kissed her cheek, slung her bag over her shoulder, and left. I stood there, my camera still on, the lens still warm. Rachel didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. But when I reviewed the photos later, one stuck with me. Claire, half in shadow, half in light, shirt open, lips parted, her eyes burning straight into the lens like she already knew where this was going, and wasn't afraid. The text came at 10:43 the next morning. Claire, want to shoot something different today? It was blunt. No good morning, no emojis, no fluff. Just that one question, hanging there on my screen like a match dangling over gasoline. My thumb hovered above the reply button longer than I'd like to admit. Me, when and where? Claire, your studio. Noon. You free? Me. I can be. Rachel was already gone by the time I got downstairs. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, half rinsed, her lipstick smeared faintly across the rim. I stared at it longer than I should have. It felt like evidence of routine, of distance, of absence masquerading as presence. I checked my reflection in the microwave's brushed metal door. I looked like a man about to do something wrong. At 12:01 sharp, Claire knocked. This time, she wore white, an off-shoulder blouse that fell loose and delicate over tight, gray jeans. No lipstick, no perfume. Her hair was pulled back in a soft, messy bun, strands falling around her ears. She looked different, softer somehow. Hey, I said, stepping aside. Hey yourself. She breezed in like she owned the space. She looked around the studio and gave a small nod. I like it better in the daylight. I like it better with someone in it. She raised a brow. Flirting before the camera even warms up? Risky. Just honest. Claire shrugged off her denim jacket and stepped to the white backdrop. Her fingers played at the hem of her shirt, tugging it down. She didn't ask for music. She didn't ask for direction. She just said, start. I lifted the Canon, adjusted the aperture, and clicked once. Claire didn't smile. She didn't pose. She simply stood there, staring through the lens. I snapped again and again. With each click, something shifted in the room. The air felt warmer. Her stance relaxed. She moved with intention, not a model trying to impress, but a woman unafraid of being seen. She slid one hand across her collarbone, her fingers brushing the side of her neck. Click. She tilted her head, parted her lips just slightly. Click. Then, wordlessly, she reached for the edge of her blouse and pulled it over her head in one smooth motion. Underneath, a simple black bralette, soft fabric cupping curves I'd noticed before but never studied. Her skin was pale, flushed slightly pink along her sternum. My fingers twitched on the lens. You want raw, right? She asked, almost daring me. I didn't answer. I didn't stop her either. She turned, giving me her side profile, one shoulder raised slightly. Her spine curved delicately as she exhaled. The light from the window brushed over her like it was just as hungry as I was. I stepped closer, camera still at my eye, framing the shot like it was life or death. Claire moved slower now, deliberate. Her hand skimmed the waistband of her jeans, but didn't push them down. Instead, she sat on the edge of the stool by the far wall, legs crossed, her expression unreadable. This isn't about sex, I said quietly. She looked up at me, her voice lower. Isn't it? Click. We were quiet after that. No moody music. No instructions. Just breath and the soft hum of the studio light. Claire leaned back on the stool, arching slightly, letting her shirt hang forgotten on the floor. My lens followed every shift. I don't know when I stopped thinking about Rachel. Maybe when Claire laughed, soft, unexpected, real. Maybe when her foot brushed mine as she shifted. Maybe when her eyes caught the light just right, and I realized she wasn't posing for me anymore. She was inviting me in. The room pulsed with a strange energy. Not lust, not yet, but anticipation. That electric hush before a storm. Claire tilted her head. You're not behind the camera anymore, she said. I blinked. What do you mean? You're in the frame now? Whether you like it or not. The camera beeped. Dead battery. Saved by the silence. I stepped back, breaking the charge between us. That's it, I said, voice hoarse. We're done. Claire rose from the stool, smoothing her jeans. She bent to pick up her blouse, but didn't put it on right away. Instead, she walked toward me, barefoot now, the hardwood cool beneath her steps. She reached out, gently brushed a speck of dust from my shirt. Her hand lingered at my chest. You're good at pretending you're just documenting, she said. But you feel this. My phone buzzed loudly on the table. Rachel. Claire pulled her hand back, slowly, like it physically hurt her to disconnect. You should get that, she said, turning away. I answered. Hey. Just checking in, Rachel said. I'm thinking pasta tonight, unless you had something else in mind. Claire was pulling her shirt back over her head. She moved slowly, deliberately. No, I said, eyes still locked on Claire's shoulder. Pasta's good. Cool. Love you. Yeah, you too. Claire slipped on her jacket. As she reached for the door, she turned back briefly. You going to send me the photos? She asked, her voice even now. I'll edit them first. No rush, she said. But I want to see how you see me. I didn't answer. I just stood there, camera in one hand, guilt slithering up my spine. She left without another word. The door clicked softly behind her. I sat down at my desk, opened the camera's memory card, and loaded the images. Each photo was electric. Tension in every frame. Her body language wasn't pornographic. It was human. Exposed. Commanding. Not asking for permission. Not afraid of consequences. And I had captured all of it. But when I looked at the very last frame, something inside me twisted. She wasn't looking at the camera in that one. She was looking at me. The photos haunted me. I sat at my editing desk the next morning, half a cup of lukewarm coffee abandoned beside my mouse. Claire's face filled the screen. Her mouth slightly parted. Her eyes half-lidded with something between defiance and desire. The curve of her shoulder, the faint rise of her breath in the shot right before the camera died. It all looked too real. Too intimate. It was supposed to be about vulnerability, rawness, the spirit of the project. But when I looked at the images, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I hadn't captured the unknown. I had captured temptation, alive and breathing in my own studio. I closed the photo preview. My cursor hovered over the delete icon for a long second. I couldn't click it. Instead, I backed everything up to a separate drive and locked the folder. At least for now. Rachel was still asleep upstairs. I could hear the faint, rhythmic whoosh of her sound machine, an artificial waterfall washing over our increasingly artificial intimacy. I shut off the computer. The studio felt heavier now, like something had happened in here that changed the air. Claire's scent still lingered faintly, mixing with the memory of skin and shadows. By the time Rachel came down, dressed in sweats and squinting toward the coffee pot, I had tried to make the room look untouched. But the tension still sat on my shoulders like a lead vest. You heading to the studio again today? She asked, yawning into her mug. Maybe, I said, thinking about changing the setup. Lighting's not doing what I want. She nodded absently and scrolled through her phone. We didn't talk about Claire. She didn't ask, and that was almost worse than if she had. Claire texted again the next evening. Claire, I haven't stopped thinking about that shoot. Claire, we captured something real. Don't pretend otherwise. I didn't reply, but I didn't block her either. At 11:47 p.m., she sent another one. Claire, you want to shoot again tomorrow? You know it. She was right. We didn't speak much when she arrived. She wore a long black coat and red flats. Her lips were bare this time. No makeup, no armor. You still trying to pretend this is just photography? She asked quietly. I didn't answer. Instead, I dimmed the overheads and adjusted the softbox to a warmer tone. The shadows crawled gently up the walls, softer than night, but just as secretive. Claire stepped into the center of the studio and slipped off her coat. This time, there was no blouse underneath, just her skin. She stood there, unashamed, hands at her sides, eyes meeting mine without blinking. "Capture this moment," she whispered. "Right now." I raised the camera. My hands didn't shake, but my breathing did. The shutter clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I lowered the camera, set it down carefully. We stood in silence, the hum of the light fixture like static between us. Claire took a slow step forward. Then another. "Say stop," she said. "Say it now, and I will." I didn't. Her hands found the hem of my shirt and tugged it upward. I let her. We collided somewhere between guilt and hunger. Her lips found mine, and it wasn't delicate. It was years of neglect unraveling in a single breath. Her hands pressed against my chest, then ran up to my jaw, guiding me down to her mouth again. Her skin was warm, her scent dizzying. She didn't ask for gentleness, and I didn't give it. I backed her toward the wall, kissing her deeper, harder. Her fingers tangled in my hair, her thighs brushing mine. This wasn't a kiss. This was a choice. A tearing. And I made it willingly. We didn't make it to the bed in the corner of the studio. Instead, we fell into each other against the backdrop itself. Paper crinkled beneath our feet, light pooling over our bare skin. Her breath hitched as my mouth moved to her collarbone. She arched against me, hands pulling me closer, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. Rachel, the house, the lie I used to call a marriage. All of it blurred, and I let it. After, we lay on the backdrop paper, catching our breath. Claire ran her hand along my arm, slow and soothing. "This isn't just about art anymore," she murmured. "I know. You're not going back, are you?" I didn't respond right away. "I don't know," I said finally. She turned her head to look at me, eyes unreadable now. "I'm not a fling," she said. "I didn't say you were. But you're still acting like it's all just happening to you." Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. "This is a mess," I muttered. "No. What you've been living in is a mess," Claire said, propping herself on one elbow. This is clarity." I looked at her, her bare skin glowing in the warm light, her eyes sharper than ever. And I couldn't deny it. She was the first thing I'd truly seen in a long time. Rachel was asleep when I got upstairs. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her. The rise and fall of her chest. The faint furrow in her brow even in sleep. The woman I had promised to love, to protect, to honor. I slipped into bed without touching her. My skin still smelled like another woman, and I didn't wash it off. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across the bed, sharp and warm. Rachel wasn't beside me. I could hear the shower running, her soft humming barely audible through the closed bathroom door. It sounded unfamiliar, like a distant echo from a different life. I stared at the ceiling. Claire's lipstick was still smudged on my collarbone. A faint red ghost. I didn't wash it off. Instead, I grabbed a clean shirt and went downstairs, where the smell of coffee greeted me like some strange apology from the house itself. Rachel emerged soon after, her damp hair tied back, a to-go mug in her hand. "I've got a full slate today," she said. "Don't forget, the gas bill's due." "Got it," I said. My voice came out hoarse. I cleared my throat. She paused in the hallway, her eyes flicking toward the studio door. "Did you shoot anything yesterday?" I hesitated. "Yeah, I lied. Some lighting tests. Nothing worth showing yet." She gave a distracted nod and kissed my cheek. Light, absent. I wondered if she could taste Claire on my skin. Then she was gone, and I was left in the stillness. The studio felt too quiet. The chaos of yesterday had been swept clean, but the memory lingered like fingerprints on glass. I sat at the desk, opened the gallery. The photos of Claire from our second shoot were sharper, more daring. Not just nudity, but intent. Her body curved like punctuation. Her expression blurred the line between surrender and control. Every frame pulsed with something unspoken. I told myself it was for the project. I told myself it was about art, expression, authenticity. But when I reached the shot where her fingers curled into my belt loops, her mouth barely parted as if she'd just whispered something I forgot to hear, I closed the file. Because the truth was, I wasn't shooting with Claire anymore. I was sleeping with her. It started happening regularly. Once, then twice a week. Then more. Always in the studio. Always beneath the pretense of new concepts, new sessions. The lines blurred so slowly I didn't realize when the project stopped being about the intimate unknown and became entirely about her. Claire filled the lens completely now. Her body, her voice, her laughter as she tossed her clothes into the corner of the room like she was shedding more than fabric. Some days we shot for 10 minutes and spent the rest tangled in sheets. Other times, we never even turned the camera on. "I'm your muse now," she whispered one night, legs wrapped around me, her breath warm against my jaw. Or not. I wanted to say no, but I didn't. Because she was. Because she was what I couldn't stop chasing, even when I knew I was already caught. Rachel didn't ask questions. She didn't notice, or didn't want to. She was deep into some new project at work, late nights, texts about client calls, excuses I used to believe without thinking. Now they felt flimsy, a mirror of my own. I'd leave the studio just before she got home, slip upstairs for a quick shower, erase the scent of Claire with lavender soap and steam. I told myself I could balance it, that the affair wasn't the end, just a diversion, a space to feel something again. But then I started noticing other things. The way Rachel no longer asked me to sit with her during dinner. The way she stopped asking me to kiss her goodnight. The way she always angled her phone away from me now, like she was hiding something. The irony twisted in my gut. It should have made me angry. Instead, it made me more reckless. One afternoon, while Rachel was out, Claire came by earlier than usual. She was already barefoot when I opened the door, her bag slung over one shoulder, her eyes dancing with something wicked. "I brought props," she said, lifting the bag slightly. "Props? For the next shoot," she teased, pulling out a sheer black robe and a pair of silver cuffs. "Don't look at me like that. You said you wanted authenticity. You sure this isn't performance art? Only if you're watching closely." She stepped into the light and undressed slowly, teasing the fabric of the robe around her hips, then slipping her arms through the sleeves. I adjusted the camera, trying to focus, but the blood in my veins had other ideas. "Tell me when," she said, leaning back against the wall. The light caught the swell of her hip, her ribs rising with each breath. "When?" The shutter clicked. Again. Again. She moved like a song I didn't know the lyrics to but somehow recognized. But just as I found the rhythm, my phone buzzed loudly against the table. "Rachel." I froze. Claire tilted her head. "You going to get that?" "No," I said, turning back to her. She smiled. "Good answer." And I kissed her like I needed her to drown me. That night, I lay in bed beside my wife, pretending to sleep. Rachel shifted once, sighing, her body angled away from mine like a shoreline retreating from the tide. I stared into the dark, wondering how long it had been since we touched each other without obligation, without thinking about what came after, wondering if she could feel the heat still radiating from my skin, a phantom of the hours I had spent with Claire. A part of me wanted her to turn and ask, to force me to lie, to confess, to do something. But she didn't, and I didn't either, because in the quiet of that night, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure who I loved anymore, but I knew exactly who I was falling for. Rachel started looking at me differently. It wasn't suspicion, not at first. More like distant curiosity. Like I was a photo she'd seen 100 times, but suddenly noticed something off in the composition. A crooked frame. A shadow that wasn't there before. She started asking small questions. "Where have you been today? Shooting anything good lately?" But there was never pressure in her tone. That was the thing. The danger wasn't in confrontation. It was in the quiet way she started watching me closer. And the truth was, I was slipping. Claire had become more than a distraction. She'd become a fixture. Her toothbrush was in the drawer beneath the sink in the guest bathroom now. A spare robe hanging behind the studio door. A bottle of perfume left deliberately on my nightstand once. A bold dare I quickly hid before Rachel could find it. We were getting reckless. We had to. It wasn't lust anymore. It was something deeper. Something more dangerous. One evening, Rachel came home earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen, shirt still damp from a rushed shower after Claire had left less than 10 minutes earlier. My heart dropped the second I heard her keys jangle in the lock. She walked in holding a brown paper bag. "Thai food. We haven't eaten together in forever," she said, placing it on the counter. I smiled. "Tried to. That sounds great." We sat down. The food smelled incredible, but I barely tasted it. Rachel ate in silence for a few bites, then looked up from her plate. "You seem lighter," she said. I froze. "Lighter? Yeah, happier. Like something's changed. My mind raced. Well, the project's finally clicking. She nodded slowly. Claire's still helping with that. I paused. Sometimes. Why? No reason, she said. Just, I saw her text you the other night. That stopped me cold. What did it say? I asked carefully. Didn't read it, she replied, but her eyes lingered on mine. The notification just popped up when your phone was unlocked. I reached for my drink, hand steady by sheer force of will. She's just been modeling a few times. Nothing serious, I said. She's curious about the process. Rachel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Claire's always been curious. Then she set her chopsticks down, wiped her mouth, and stood. I think I'd like to pose for you again, she said. I blinked. You would? Yeah. I mean, you've been doing this for months. It's your passion, right? She tilted her head. I used to be part of it. There was no sarcasm in her voice. That made it worse. Sure, I said. Of course. Maybe this weekend? She asked, already halfway to the stairs. I nodded, voice caught in my throat. She paused on the landing. Oh, also, you left a print out the other day. On the hallway table. My stomach twisted. What print? Rachel turned her head, eyes narrowing slightly. It was just a silhouette. A woman in profile. Bare shoulder. But I know my own body. And that wasn't me. I opened my mouth, then shut it. She didn't wait for an answer. Just turned and walked up the stairs. I texted Claire that night. Me. We need to cool it for a while. Rachel's starting to notice things. The typing indicator popped up almost immediately. Then stopped. Then started again. Claire. So I'm just a liability now? Me. That's not what I said. Claire. You didn't have to. I'm not a secret you can keep folding into your back pocket whenever she calls. Me, Claire. Claire. You asked for honesty. Vulnerability. I gave it. And now you're afraid of it? I didn't reply. The next morning, she didn't text. And I hated how much that silence burned. Rachel was different too, after that night. More alert. Polite. But everything about her felt like it was teetering on the edge of something unspoken. She lingered at the studio door when she passed it. Asked more questions. Subtle ones. Like a detective playing good cop. Can I see the new shots? She asked once, while sipping coffee at the kitchen table. They're still unedited, I said. Rough. She nodded. I don't mind rough. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I walked past her bag in the hallway and caught the edge of a print sticking out. One of my shots. Claire. In shadow. Her back arched. The robe sliding off her shoulder. My breath caught. Rachel had found the folder. She hadn't confronted me. Not yet. I called Claire the next day. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Just before sunset, I got a single message. Claire. She wants to pose for you now. That's rich. Me. Don't do this. Claire. Don't do what? Be honest. Say what we both know. She doesn't want to be your muse. She just wants to claim the space I filled. Me. It's more complicated than that. Claire. No, it's not. You either want me in the frame or you don't. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because she wasn't wrong. That night, Rachel sat on the couch with her laptop open, legs curled beneath her. She glanced at me as I passed. Let me know when you're ready to shoot, she said. And in her voice, there was no seduction. Just something cold. Measured. Like she knew exactly what she was walking into. And planned to burn it all down. Rachel scheduled her shoot for Sunday morning. She didn't ask me if I was available, just told me. 10 a.m., she said, standing at the doorway to the studio like a client, not a wife. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. I'm finally ready. Ready for what? I didn't ask. I spent that Saturday cleaning the studio obsessively. I rolled out fresh backdrop paper, changed the bulbs in the softboxes, calibrated the camera, checked the batteries, wiped down every surface. Anything to stay busy. Anything to avoid thinking about the photo she'd found. The one that wasn't her. She hadn't brought it up again, which only made it worse. That night, I lay beside her, listening to her breathing as she fell asleep. It was steady, almost forced, like someone playing dead. My body was facing hers, but my soul was stretched thin across two women, like some thread pulled to the point of fraying. I didn't sleep. At 9:56 the next morning, Rachel knocked on the studio door. When I opened it, she was wearing a black silk robe cinched tightly at the waist. Her makeup was minimal, her hair tied up into a messy bun with a few deliberate strands loose, artful, controlled. Her eyes didn't flinch. You ready? She asked. I nodded. lifting the camera from the hook. Yeah. She stepped into the light like she'd done it 100 times. But there was no warmth this time. No shared history. She wasn't offering herself. She was presenting a challenge. Tell me where to stand, she said. I motioned to the center. She walked barefoot to the paper, then stood tall, uncinching the robe and letting it fall. She was naked beneath. The air caught in my lungs. She didn't blush, didn't avert her gaze. Instead, she looked straight into the lens and said, "Let's see what you really see." Click. I adjusted the aperture, focused in. Click. She tilted her chin upward, her arms loose at her sides, her body perfectly still. Click. The camera betrayed me. My hands were steady, but inside I was cracking. Every pose she gave was meticulous, composed, cold. She wasn't trying to be sensual. She was trying to be undeniable. A declaration. This is me. This is mine. Click. Do you want me to move? She asked. Pose differently? I didn't answer right away. You can turn to the side. She did, slowly. Click. The curve of her back. The arch of her heel. She had never let herself be this bare before, not in years. And now she was offering all of it. Not for me, but for what she suspected. For the war she didn't want to name. She turned again to face me directly. You ever shoot Claire like this? She asked suddenly. I froze. My finger hovered over the shutter, but didn't press. What? You heard me. The studio felt 10 degrees colder. I lowered the camera. Rachel stepped forward, picking up the robe and slipping it back over her shoulders. It's a simple question. My mouth opened, but no sound came. She nodded slowly, as if my silence confirmed everything she already knew. I thought so, she whispered. And then, before I could stop her, she walked to the desk and grabbed a USB drive. What is that? I asked. She held it up. Something Claire left. In your inbox. My stomach dropped. I didn't open it, she said. Not until this morning. I figured, if you weren't going to tell me, she eventually would. She walked to the wall and turned on the projector. Plugged in the drive. The screen flared to life. And then, Claire, naked, on her knees. Her mouth parted, eyes glazed. Another photo. Her sprawled across the studio couch, tangled in sheets I recognized instantly. Another, her hand gripping mine. Both of us half-dressed, her lips on my neck. Then a string of them, rapid fire. Black and white, color, shadows, flash. Like a montage from a film no one was supposed to see. The real project. The one that had never been edited. Only lived in the folder labeled behind the lens. Rachel stood frozen, arms crossed tightly, her breath shallow. I should be screaming, she said. I didn't know I started. No, she cut in. Don't explain. Don't insult me like that. The slideshow stopped. The last image lingered. Claire, resting against me. My hand on her thigh. Her smile smug. Rachel walked over and ejected the drive. Then she dropped it on the floor and stepped on it, heel cracking the casing. I asked you to capture me, she said, voice trembling now. But you were already done. You'd already found what you wanted. Rachel, you brought her into our space, she said, stepping toward me. You turned our life into a gallery of betrayal. You didn't just lie. You created something from it. You framed it. I wanted to say something. Anything. But all I could see was her face, red with grief, her hands shaking as she reached for the doorknob. I'm done, she whispered. And then she was gone. The door didn't slam. It closed softly, which somehow made it worse. I stood alone in the studio, the lights still glowing. The photos of Claire no longer felt electric. They felt obscene. I turned off the projector, and the silence that followed was deafening. The house didn't feel empty. It felt erased. Rachel didn't pack a suitcase. She didn't take much, at least not that I noticed. A few clothes, her toothbrush, her wedding ring. The photo from our wedding that used to sit on the bookshelf was gone too. I stood there for a long time, staring at the hollow rectangle of dust it left behind. She didn't scream when she left. She didn't cry. She simply vanished with the finality of someone who had stopped needing answers. I didn't know where she went. I didn't ask. And I didn't call Claire. Not at first. That afternoon, I walked into the studio and sat on the floor. The backdrop paper was still pulled out, wrinkled from where Rachel had stood. Her hair tie lay near the baseboard, forgotten, maybe intentional. The robe she'd worn was still folded neatly over the back of the stool. Everything in the room felt like it belonged to someone else. I powered on the camera. The photos of Rachel loaded automatically. They were stunning in their starkness. unfiltered and painfully human. The lines of her face weren't softened by affection. The nudity wasn't sensual. It was confrontational. She hadn't posed for me. She had revealed herself in full, only to watch me flinch away. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. Out of morbid instinct, or maybe guilt, I opened the folder Claire had titled behind the lens. There they were, the full archive. Over 100 photos, some from shoots I remembered, others clearly taken without me knowing. Claire had turned the lens on me when I wasn't looking. Shots of me dressing, undressing, standing at the desk, post-orgasmic and dazed. The camera catching the brief flicker of guilt I tried so hard to ignore. She documented everything. Not just us together, but me alone, at my most vulnerable. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had set out to capture rawness, honesty, truth. But it wasn't until I saw myself through her lens that I realized how exposed I truly was, and how much I had missed what mattered most. Claire showed up 3 days later. No warning, no knock, just the sound of her heels on the hardwood and the soft creak of the studio door opening. I was sitting on the couch, a whiskey glass in my hand, the lights off. She stepped in slowly, eyeing the space like it had changed shape since she'd last been in it. "Where is she?" she asked. "Gone." Claire closed the door behind her. She saw the folder. I figured. Her eyes scanned my face. "And you blame me?" "I blame me." She walked toward me, her silhouette cutting clean through the fading afternoon light. "I didn't mean for her to find it." "Did you mean for her to never find it?" Claire flinched. "I just wanted to be seen." "You were." "Not enough," she whispered. She sat beside me, not touching, her hands twisted in her lap. I didn't want to hurt her. "Claire," I exhaled. She wasn't just hurt. She was dismantled. Claire's expression darkened. "You weren't happy. Don't pretend otherwise. You lit up when I walked into this space." "Because I was escaping." Her jaw tightened. "So it meant nothing to you?" "It meant everything. And that's the problem." She looked down, her voice barely audible. "I thought I was more than a stand-in. I thought I was the muse." "You were," I said. "But not for the reasons you wanted." Claire stood abruptly. "Then what was I?" I didn't answer. Because I couldn't define it. Because she'd been a lifeline and a storm. A catalyst and a mistake. Because I had loved the way she saw me. I had loved her freedom, her chaos, her hands on my skin when I needed to feel anything. But I didn't love her. And she knew it. Her face twisted. "She'll never forgive you." "I know." Claire nodded slowly. "Then I guess we're both done here." She turned and walked out. No kiss. No drama. Just a door closing, again. That night, I opened the old hard drive with my earliest photos of Rachel. Long before the studio. Before the marriage felt like a contract. These were casual shots. Her in the kitchen, laughing over a pan of burnt pancakes. Her curled on the couch, reading, unaware of the lens. Her in the passenger seat of my car, hair blowing across her face as she turned toward me, smiling like the moment would last forever. They weren't technically perfect, but they were alive. They were what I had lost sight of. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I spent the next morning combing through every folder. I deleted every photo that didn't feel real. Every manipulated frame. Every carefully staged lie. I kept one. Just one. Rachel in the studio. Her last session. That moment when she stood straight and still, eyes blazing with truth. Naked not for lust, but for clarity. I printed it. Not in glossy color, but matte black and white. Then I wrote her a letter. No apologies. Just truth. And I sealed it in an envelope with the photo inside. One final frame. One last try. I didn't hear from Rachel for 10 days. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. The letter and the photo had been delivered, hand-carried to her office and signed for. I'd even watched the tracking status update, refreshing like some desperate voyeur, hoping a read receipt might also come with forgiveness. It didn't. I spent those 10 days in a house that no longer felt like a home. The silence was the worst part. Not the absence of her voice, or the empty dinner table, or the fact that our bed remained untouched on one side, but the sheer, aching stillness of everything. It was like Rachel had taken the sound with her when she left. Claire didn't reach out either, and I didn't chase her. There was nothing left to salvage there. No fantasy I could pretend was noble, no passion that didn't now carry the bitter aftertaste of collateral damage. What had started as raw, exciting, unfiltered truth had become something ugly and distorted. An affair dressed in art's clothing. One night, I opened the folder labeled The Intimate Unknown. the one I had once envisioned as my grandest work. The Legacy Project, a photo series about emotional exposure and vulnerability. But scrolling through the images now, all I saw was distance. All of them, every subject, looked like they were performing, trying too hard to be brave, to be broken, to be raw. Even Claire, as open as she had always been aware. She knew where the lens was. She played to it. Only one person in that entire folder hadn't been performing. Rachel. In every shot I had ever taken of her, even the ones she didn't know I'd snapped, there was no posing, no pretense, just presence. Honest, quiet presence. And that, more than anything, was what I had betrayed. It was the 11th morning when the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. I was barefoot, still in a worn t-shirt, coffee half made on the counter. For a moment, I wondered if it was Claire again. But when I opened the door, it wasn't her. It was Rachel's father. Bill, I said, surprised. I didn't expect. May I come in? He asked, his voice even. I stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, looking around like he was taking inventory of the place. Of what was gone. Of what remained. He sat on the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands folded. She's staying with us, he said. I nodded. She hasn't said much. Not about the details. But she didn't need to. I understand. He looked at me then, eyes steady. Do you? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Then, I think so. He studied me a moment longer. She brought the photo with her. The one you sent. My pulse skipped. And she put it up on the dresser, he said. Didn't say a word. Just placed it there. Every morning when she gets ready for work, she looks at it. I sat down across from him, unsure if that was good or bad. She's not angry, you know, he added. Not in the way most people would be. You didn't just betray her. You disappointed her. And somehow, that seems to cut deeper. I swallowed hard. But, he continued, she also told me something else. She said it was the first time in months she felt truly seen. My eyes stung. I blinked it away. She asked me to bring you something, he said. From his coat pocket, he pulled out an envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was a photo I didn't remember taking. Rachel in the kitchen, hair up in a lazy bun, holding a spoon of tomato sauce with one eyebrow cocked, smiling at me like I was the only idiot who could possibly burn pasta and still make her laugh. There was a note written on the back, in her handwriting. Before all of this, we had this. Find it again, and maybe there's something left to rebuild. But not for the camera. For us. I stared at it for a long time. She's not saying yes, Bill said. But she's not saying no either. I nodded slowly, throat thick. He stood, brushing off his slacks. She'll be at our place for a while. Don't call. Don't chase. Give her space. I will. He turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing, he said. Don't make art out of pain unless you're willing to live inside it. I nodded again. Thank you. When the door closed, I just sat there, holding the photo like it was something sacred. Because maybe it was. Later that day, I walked into the studio and packed up the camera. Not because I was done photographing, but because the lens couldn't help me now. This wasn't about composition or contrast or clever lighting anymore. This was about stepping out from behind the glass and becoming visible again. I didn't step into the studio for a full week after Rachel's father left. The room was still there, unchanged, as though frozen mid-breath. The lights were off, the backdrop rolled up, the camera tucked away in its case like a dormant weapon. Every object inside was familiar, but I could no longer look at any of it without hearing Rachel's voice, quiet and hollow. You turned our life into a gallery of betrayal. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It echoed. I spent my days differently. I started jogging again. Early morning laps around the park we used to visit before life became busy and separate. I cleaned the kitchen, not just wiped it down, but deep cleaned it, every corner, every cabinet. I even threw away the cracked coffee mugs we never used, but kept for nostalgia. I didn't touch the bedroom. That still felt too intimate, too sacred. Her scent lingered in the pillows. Her drawer was empty, but I left it open anyway. Somehow, it reminded me of what needed to be filled, not with clothes, but with trust. And I didn't take any photos. Not with my phone, not with my DSLR. Not even in my mind. It was like my eyes had decided to stop documenting until I could learn to actually see again. I needed to understand what I had missed, what I had allowed to rot under the excuse of inspiration. I had been chasing light, shadows, form. But I had lost depth. On the 8th day, I opened the letter again. Rachel's handwriting was even, deliberate. It wasn't a goodbye, but it wasn't a love letter either. It was a confession of distance. She wrote about how she used to sit in the hallway just outside the studio, listening to the click of the shutter and wondering when I'd come ask her to join. But I never did. She wrote that the silence between us had once felt like peace, like comfort. But over time, it had grown teeth. She said she didn't hate me, not even after everything. But she hated the version of herself she had become beside me. Invisible, background noise to someone else's creation. And I had let her become that, because I was afraid to admit I was part of the frame too. She ended with a question. Can we learn how to see each other again, without hiding behind the lens? That night, I walked back into the studio. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, letting my eyes adjust, letting the silence stretch until it no longer felt empty, just calm. I stood and unrolled the backdrop, but didn't mount it. I moved the camera case into the closet and shut the door. Then I took down the lights, one by one. The room looked smaller without them, more honest. When I was done, I walked to the far wall where the original mood board still hung. Images of strangers clipped from magazines, concepts jotted in Sharpie, 1,000 ideas that had never quite landed. I ripped it down. Every photo, every note, every false inspiration. I left the wall blank. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a beginning. A few days later, I wrote Rachel a second letter. I didn't try to convince her to come home. I didn't try to romanticize what we had. I told her about the silence, about how I'd stopped shooting, about how I was learning, slowly, that vulnerability wasn't something you captured, it was something you earned. I enclosed the Polaroid she had sent back, the one of her in the kitchen, spoon in hand, her eyes crinkled in mid-laugh. But this time, I didn't write anything on the back, because the moment didn't need context. It just needed to be remembered. I mailed the envelope without expectation. I didn't hover by the mailbox. I didn't check my phone obsessively. I waited, quietly, like someone learning to listen again. Days passed. A week. Then two. Until finally, one morning, I found something in the mailbox. A letter. My name written in her handwriting, careful and deliberate. Inside was a photo. A recent one. Rachel, standing in front of a mirror, holding her phone to the side. Not quite a selfie. Her hair was down. She wore a loose sweater. And she was smiling. The note underneath was short. You captured the moment. Now let's see if you can rebuild the life. I held the photo for a long time. It didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like permission. Not to erase what had happened, but to begin again, this time with the lens set aside. I didn't frame the photo. I taped it to the inside of the studio closet door, so I'd see it every time I reached for my camera. A reminder. Art doesn't save people, but love can, if you're willing to focus on what really matters. Weeks passed. The light changed. Not metaphorically, literally. The angle of the sun shifted. The shadows moved across the walls at different times now. The mornings were cooler. The air sharper. Autumn creeping in. Everything outside was turning gold and brittle. But inside the house, something softer had begun to settle. Still no Rachel. Not in the doorway. Not in the bed. But she was there, in traces. Her coffee mug had reappeared in the cabinet. One of her scarves hung behind the coat rack. I found a grocery list in her handwriting on the fridge, in between bills and forgotten reminders. I never heard the door when she dropped them off. She came and went like a ghost. Only this one left things behind instead of taking them. And somehow, that hurt more than absence. Because it meant she was watching, waiting to see what I'd do with the ruins. So I built something. Not for her. For me. I started shooting again. But not people. Not models. Not muses. Things. Details. Light on a windowsill. A cracked bowl. The pale smear of steam on the bathroom mirror. The patterns in fallen leaves. The ghost of lipstick on an old mug. No subjects. No manipulation. Just the world, as it was, without asking it to pose. I developed the prints in small batches, hung them with wooden pins across the empty studio wall. The space began to look less like a confessional and more like a memory palace, fragile, ordinary, alive. One day I printed the last photo I ever took of Rachel. Her face unreadable, body angled into shadow, not quite retreating, but no longer offering herself either. I didn't hang it. I folded it gently and placed it in a drawer. Some things belong in the dark. Then came the morning I heard her footsteps. I was in the kitchen, a pan on the stove, eggs half scrambled. The front door clicked open like it always used to, followed by the familiar sound of keys dropped in the ceramic bowl by the wall. My whole body stilled, heat rising from the pan, hissing softly. And then she was there. Rachel, in jeans, boots, and one of my old flannel shirts. Her hair was loose, wind-blown, and her eyes were calm, but alert, like someone prepared for whatever came next. Neither of us said anything right away. Then, "You're cooking," she said. "I try not to burn it now." She smiled, faintly. "Progress." She stepped further into the room, glancing around. "I saw your new shots," she said. "The one of the broken vase. You came inside? I never left a key. That never stopped you before." Another pause. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "I didn't expect you to forgive me. I haven't. Not fully. But I'm listening." I nodded. "I'm not asking you to come back." She tilted her head, stepping closer. "Then what are you asking?" I looked at her, not the outline of her, not the form, not the light against her cheek, but her. The woman I'd stopped seeing long before I started cheating. "To start over," I said. "Not as muses. Not as partners. Just as people who might still know how to care for each other." Rachel looked around. "The studio looks different. I don't shoot people anymore." I noticed. "I couldn't do it honestly," I said. "Not yet." She walked toward the wall, eyeing the pinned photos. One showed an open notebook, another the inside of a dryer, a crumpled sock hanging by a thread. "This one's my favorite," she said, pointing to a photo of our hallway rug. Creased, off-center, imperfect. "I almost threw that one out," I said. She turned to face me again. "That would have been a mistake." We stood in the silence for a while. There was no apology hanging in the air. No request. Just stillness. Then, finally, she walked over to the studio closet, opened it, and saw the Polaroid she had sent, the one I'd taped inside. She touched it gently. "You kept it. I see it every time I reach for the camera." She stepped back, closed the door softly, then looked at me. "I didn't come to pick up anything," she said. "I didn't think you did. I came to ask something." "Okay." She exhaled slow. "If we take another picture, just one more, can it be without the camera?" I smiled. "I think that's the only kind worth taking now." She nodded. "Then maybe we start there." Later that evening, we sat on the back porch. No lens between us. Just tea, a blanket, and a quiet so thick it began to feel sacred. The sky turned a pale lavender. The first star blinked into existence. Rachel leaned against me, tentative at first, then fully. I didn't move, didn't speak, just let it happen. Not a frame, not a scene, just a moment. And this time, I didn't try to capture it. I lived it.